What's your response to the banning of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from Villa game next month?
I think it's a disgrace. I think the message that is being sent to Jewish people in this country is that they're not welcome here. And I think you have to look at it in context. What's happened is in the last few weeks, we saw 2 Jewish people being murdered at a synagogue simply for being Jewish. That's not happened in this country for hundreds and hundreds of years. This has always been a safe haven for Jewish people. And I think to say that we could not possibly police Israeli Jewish fans to watch a football match safely is reinforcing that message that Jews are not welcome here. And I think that is wrong.
Edmund Rand told me this morning that they are working towards an outcome. Your party, I suppose, has always gone with the line that you shouldn't interfere in operational policing matters. What should the start of the politicians be here?
Well, firstly, there were moments, for example, James cleverly overruled the Home Office to make sure that we could fund the safety of Jewish synagogues through the CST. So we have stepped in and done that politically in the past. And on this particular issue, considering what has happened in this country and the sentiment of Jewish people feeling like they are not welcome, then yes, I do think politicians should have been involved.
Do you think that the Home Secretary, or indeed Prime Minister somehow got involved, should be saying to the police, doesn't really matter, reverse this?
I do, because actually what you've seen is policing in this country has been able to protect people at the Notting Hill Carnival, where people are routinely injured. It's protected people through the Palestinian marches. And like I said, if you look at the context, I think it's really important that they do this. And the question that I would ask is, if this was known in the Home Office, why was it not dealt with before? And actually what we've seen from Labour on this and, for example, the China spy scandal, which I'm sure you'll talk about this morning, is that they have waited until after the facts to look like they're dealing with anything. And that is the problem. They are politicians. They should get involved. And the thing that we need to do at the moment in this country is be very aware that we have sectarian politics on the rise and that there are people who are trying to create a sense that Jewish people are not welcome here, and we should stand against that.
The petition that called for the banning or relocation of this match specifically referred to the Aston area where the match would be played, being, and I'm quoting here, diverse, predominantly Muslim. Does a suggestion that the match shouldn't take place in this area for that reason bother you?
Yes. And I think politicians need to have the courage to name some of the problems that this country is facing. And one of those problems is political Islam. Now, that's not to say the moderate Muslim community are a problem in Britain, but we have seen in the past extremist Islamism, and now is a problem in Britain. And now we are seeing a movement of people, last election, 5 MPs elected, simply on sectarian politics. That may be higher at the next election. So we have to grip this. And part of that is dealing with rising anti-Semitism, but part of that is dealing with integration.
What are you saying about those 5 MPs? Are you saying that you think those people shouldn't be in Parliament? They got elected. People voted for them. But
the question is why, Trevor? If you look at that manifesto, it was purely about foreign conflicts and issues that only spoke to the Muslim community. And if the people in this country are being elected on manifestos like that, there was nothing about defence, there was nothing about the wider economy of the nation, then you have to say integration is a problem and we must grip it.
Are you echoing your colleague Robert Jenrick's view about Handsworth here?
So I can't comment on that particular area because I wasn't there. But,
why not?
But I definitely will say there are parts of this country which are not properly integrated and we should worry about that. And you can see what has happened in this case. The politicians that were elected to represent those constituents petitioned them to say that Israeli Jewish fans should not be welcome here. That is the result of having sectarian politics. It is not the British way, and we need to grip it.
Let's talk about your particular area of responsibility. Mr. Miliband announces this morning that they're going to create 400,000 clean energy jobs, and he was careful to make the distinction between green jobs in general and clean energy jobs specifically. You must be happy with that.
Well, look, anything that trains young people, of course I'm for. But firstly, I would question, what are those jobs? We've seen at the moment when people talk about green jobs, the vast majority of them are not in clean energy. And actually, I think in this case, he's going to include welders and electricians and plumbers, which we need in the economy anyway. So I'm all for jobs. That's a good thing. But the question that I have for Ed is, what is he doing to the wider economy overall? His plans are to sign up to the highest offshore wind prices that we've seen in a decade, far higher than the current cost of electricity, making energy incredibly expensive in this country for the long term. That will have as a net result less jobs overall.
Sticking with the jobs, one of the things that I talked to him about is the fact that the jobs that you mentioned are all on the shortage list. That is to say that employers can bring people from abroad because we have a shortage of these people. Well, of course, we can train people up, but that will take time. If you were in government, would you take those jobs off the shortage list to force employers to employ British people to do these jobs?
Well, we've said we've got to massively reduce migration, which would mean that you would have to change some of the shortage list visa exemptions. And I do think there should be a greater focus on training people. And I think it has been an easy lever for business to bring people over. And, you go to some of these areas and, for example, areas that we're going to build nuclear power plants, you're going to need welders, you're going to need electricians. I did a £600 million package for skills just in those areas because actually I think it's really important that British people can benefit from those jobs.
One other area which has been very much in the news this week is our relationship with China. Obviously, we don't want to get into some of the murkier element of this, but there's a continuing question about what role China should play in the UK infrastructure. Now, wind turbines, cables, all the kinds of networks that would have to be done to create this green economy. What part can China play in that? Or would you close the door to Chinese investment in critical UK infrastructure?
So we need to be very careful. It's something that I talked about when I was Energy Secretary. Europe has just weaned itself off Russian oil and gas, and now it's making itself dependent on Chinese critical minerals. And we need to be very clear-eyed about that. We cannot have a reliance on our energy system for products that can only be made in China. So some of that is to look at the supply chain, but there's also to look at which types of energy build that reliance on China. We know that, for example, wind and solar panels are much more reliant than, say, nuclear power, which is one of the reasons that I've been such a big proponent of nuclear, is because it gives us energy security because we can control the supply chain.
Just very quickly, by the way, there's one other thing I want to ask you about, but just on net zero. Have you abandoned the goal of net zero?
So we've said we would repeal the climate change target, and actually we think the net zero targets are a problem, and that's for three reasons. One, it's making the cost of electricity incredibly expensive, and two, we're seeing jobs move from this country to countries abroad. That's actually worsening climate emissions. Every time a business leaves here for a country powered by coal, you're worsening climate emissions. And so we don't think it's doing what it says on the tin. The net zero targets at this point are not helping climate change, the economy, or cost of living for households.
And is there another reason for this, which is that Reform are against it?
Well, if you look at what I did when I was in government, I started a net zero reset. I said we need to be honest about costs. If you look at Kemi Badenoch, our leader, she was one of two people in Parliament who spoke up when the legislation was passed and said, I'm worried about costs.
Yeah, but
what you're seeing
But you hadn't abandoned the net zero target.
So you might argue we hadn't gone far enough, but what we did at the time was incredibly controversial. And I can say that because I was being sued by multiple climate change activists at the time. So this is the continuing of beliefs that both me and my leader have held, because we are worried about cost of living in this country. I personally am incredibly worried about the fact that we've got the highest electricity bills in the world, and we need to focus on bringing them down.
Claire Coutinho, thank you for your time this morning.